So, are you finding yourself consistently frustrated or even powerless in an experience where people are using the same excuse time and time again to excuse their behavior? I just can't manage time. I don't have enough money to be able to do that. I don't think that there's any point in trying. Do you notice that that really triggers you when people use justifications and excuses? If that's so, and you're also noticing tension around the top of your shoulders, and maybe even into the middle of your chest, consider that you may just be disempowered in the experience of justifications and excuses. And this video will have you recognize that and be able to flip that so that you can then have power where you normally feel powerless. Let's go a little bit deeper into the experience of justifications and excuses, which I'm saying in holistic terms sits across the center of the chest and across the same area on the back of the body. Okay? And consider that an excuse or justification is just a conversation that keeps being repeated until it starts to actually gain its own power, its own traction. Okay? And it's one that often is used to buy us out of a situation. You know, almost like rather than apologizing or taking responsibility for the actions that led to something, we instead go, oh, well, it wasn't me, it was traffic, or there just wasn't enough time, or whatever it is that comes out as that excuse or justification. Now, often it's easier to see these things when other people are using justifications, but much harder to see from inside our own perspective or truth. Okay, and I have talked about how truth actually has you align with something so you can't actually see it happening. So do check that video out, right? But the first thing you want to be clear about is it's just a conversation. But if you let the conversation be repeated and used enough times, it will show up when you don't want it to show up, okay? It will take control of circumstances and it will disempower you from being able to do anything other than what's in line with the excuse or the justification. So once you start to notice that the excuses are running your life, what do you do about that? Okay, well, here's some tips that will show you and free you from the experience of excuses and justifications. So tip number one regarding justifications and excuses. First is to notice how much pull and significance a particular justification has. Okay, like if you notice yourself saying something and you suddenly feel like you're impervious, like no one can touch you because you've got that great excuse, okay, then that tells you that the excuse is starting to gain traction and power, and very soon you won't have it, it will be holding you hostage. Okay, so you'll notice where there's an emotional or an energetic reaction to an excuse or justification. And the flip side of that is if someone uses a justification against you and you just suddenly feel like, oh, well, that's the end of the conversation, you can't talk after that, like there's no way of reconciling it, or there's no way in the future of changing what's going to happen, like it's inevitable that person's going to be late, it's inevitable that they're just not going to be able to be involved with something, or they're not going to commit themselves because they can't afford it, then that equally is an indicator that a justification and or an excuse is in play. And the first thing you want to do is just pause, gather yourself, and get ready to continue a conversation, even if you don't know what's going to happen, because you're taking an old narrative out of the space. There will be a void, almost like an awkwardness and uncomfortableness before the next conversation for what is beyond the justification can be had. Okay? Another thing to consider is notice that sometimes justifications seem really personal, like I'm just really bad with time, or I'm just not very good with money, or whatever it is that the narrative is, the conversation is. But actually, it's not personal at all. One of the things about justifications and excuses being so close to the heart chakra is that we accept them as part of ourselves when actually they're not. These are conversations that are out in the world, and lots of human beings are actually engaging with them. In fact, they were probably going before you were even born. So when you can depersonalize an excuse or a justification, Sometimes you can do that by writing it down and then just looking at it. What you can do it by, as you go through your life, listening for the different excuses and justifications other people are using, realizing how much you use them. It separates you from that personalized pull or the embarrassment of hearing the same excuse coming out of somebody else's mouth and knowing it's an excuse rather than the truth. Okay? As you separate yourself from it, you start to be able to get power to go, yes, that's often true, but it doesn't have to be true this time. There's an opportunity to step beyond it. Another tip is, put results down in the future, like write them in your diary, speak them to a friend, that would require you to break past your current justification and excuse. And don't even work out before you put them out there how you would make them real. You're just going to put them there, and then you're going to allow those things to start to pull you towards them. And I've done this a number of times where I put like dreams or hopes out there in the future, even next to a particular date. And even as my mind is telling me all the reasons why it can't happen, and that's how excuses get driven up, you can hear them. Even as my body is physically feeling uncomfortable, nervous, defeated, powerless, the results have actually been happening. And I've had to deal with, there's all this stuff that's going on in my body that's trying to convince me that the future can't be a particular way. But actually, the excuse is just one version of the future, and there are so many different versions of the future that have nothing to do with that justification or excuse, that all I need to start to do is to face towards those and actually bring those towards me. So, I hope these tips are going to be really useful for you. Notice when you find yourself not engaging with one of my videos, like it's not really going to make a difference, and that's just another excuse. Like the excuse of not hitting the subscribe button, by the way, on my videos. So do that. Okay, you're giving yourself the best possible opportunity to intervene holistically in what you're experiencing in life and cause breakthrough results. And I'd love to hear from you as to what you're producing out of these videos.